With 28 years later out, we finally get concrete answers as to what happens to the infected of the rage virus long term, or at least how it has persisted for nearly 3 decades in the British Isles. From mutations in the body dependent on the host to environmental factors, it looks like the infected are here to stay for a long while. But does it make sense though? Do the rage infected having longevity and now variants detract or add to their lore to make them stand out, or just blend in with other deadites of the zombie genre? Or did they just skim it over in the most lukewarm explanation possible, as if they saw Bill in the trailer for the original Left 4 Dead
They're changing
and said, "Oh, that's brilliant, let's do that"? Or are evolving zombies just a necessity for the genre since people are so fatigued about the mindless, bloodthirsty animal concept? Well, let's dig into the bloody flesh, as today we are discussing how 28 years later completely changed the rage virus. Something that does make sense is today's sponsor, Factor. Factor takes the stress out of meal planning and sets you up for success. Skip the grocery stores, prep work, and cooking fatigue. Instead, get chef-crafted, dietitian-approved meals delivered right to your door. With over 35 meals to choose from per week, including options like keto, calorie smart, vegan and veggie, and more. Even when life gets chaotic, Factor is flexible. Change your order up every week with plans from 4 to 18 meals per week, or pause or reschedule your deliveries anytime. Factor also has an offering of mouth-watering, fresh, gourmet plus meals, which you can choose from to spice up your weekly meal plan, especially if you've been craving something meaty. The truffle butter filet mignon is delicious and does not lose any of its tasty juices even when reheated, accompanied with premium produce that complements the protein for a lovely meal like these rosemary roasted carrots and a potato leek mash and steak meal. Keep your eyes peeled for surf and surf and turf meal options coming soon. Factor is a great way for me to be sure to have a nutritious and delicious meal when I'm writing videos and researching the ever-changing lore of some movie franchises. And it has also cut down grocery trips and cooking that I have much more time for all my favorite activities. Head to Factor75.com or click the link below and use code 50WSG to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first Factor box. That's code 50WSG at Factor75.com to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. It's been long known from both the ending of 28 Days Later and the cleanup of the first outbreak in the beginning of 28 Weeks Later that within the span of just over a month, most infected will die out from starvation, dehydration, and or the severe toll the virus causes on the body, especially with how the infected profusely vomit copious amounts of blood. It does not matter how mutated or evolved the virus is or what it does to the body, initially all those symptoms would add up to outright drain the body to the point of death. And that was the case until the franchise decided that it wanted to come back after an 18-year-long hiatus. So the rage virus, what was its base kit and origins before we get into what changed about it? Having originated in a Cambridge primate research center testing on chimps, strapping them to binding tables to forcefully make them watch violent media uninterrupted for hours on end, all in an attempt to create a chemical or drug that could inhibit or reduce anger issues and temperaments in a person, believing themselves to be close to a breakthrough with the chimps as inhibitors of the rage-suppressing drug. They devised a way to mass produce and spread it to the populace. They considered both pills or spraying it in the air via aerosol, but those quite weren't working. Dr. Clive eventually came to the conclusion that by compounding the drug with the highly contagious Ebola virus, what could possibly go wrong there, that it could be administered to the public easily and effectively. However, the Ebola strain caused the anger inhibitors to mutate and then cause a recipient to instead go into a mindless, blood-curdling rage as if exposed to a worse form of rabies. As we all know, the animal rights activists broke in and freed the monkeys containing this Uno reverse card anger inhibitor to break out into Britain and the surrounding area and remain there for 28 years. The infected themselves are rabid and singular-minded. Once that molecule of rage gets gets in you, it's only a matter of seconds till your consciousness and self of sense is completely overridden. Capillaries hemorrhaging, flesh burning, muscles convulsing, and tons of blood bleeding out from your eyes, nose, and vomiting even more blood, causing one to horrifically beat healthy people to death without primarily thinking of spreading the virus. A trademark of them is that they mutilate and brutalate any healthy person they can get their hands on. If they end up infected, well, it happened. But it's a common occurrence for them to just outright pummel you to death if they get the chance. As seen with the infected Don and his wife, the hordes of corpses in the London church at the beginning of Days Later, and more. It's the rage virus after all. This is a contagious virus, don't get me wrong, and the infected numbers are astronomical, but it's the fact that it infects and transforms a host so fast that it prevents an infected from killing someone most of the time. Basically, it's a race between the blood and saliva changing you in between 10 to 20 seconds, or if the rage zombie will slaughter you outright before then. So it begs the question once again, how can a strain that both causes a host to basically wreck their own body without fuel or rest and outright murder a percentage of victims before they ever become infected? Well, isn't it obvious? It mutated and evolved. I'm not going to sit here and be a hypocrite and criticize 28 years later for having the rage virus change its dynamic. I hypothesized multiple times that it could change, since the climate of zombie media has basically made it mandatory these days that infected and zombies alike have different variants roaming the land with different levels of lethality and danger. It just adds a little bit of variety in the, well, not really afterlife or life, it's kind of in between. Originally, the most we got in the way of changing infected was Dawn showing forms of sentience throughout 28 weeks later, actively participating in self-preservation by avoiding napalm strikes, using weapons to beat the hell out of people, and hunting his son Andy across long distances. Beyond that, it was just common infected swarming at any sound or sight they could pick up. And hey, the rage infected did inspire Turtle Rock and Valve to make Left 4 Dead's Infected, so it's only natural that things come full circle as the rage virus gets its own special infected, but in a less video game shooter kind of balancing fun way, in more of a how would steroids affect many different people. I had many theories on how the rage virus continued to stay rampant over so many years, with the infected having short lifespans in their conception, with trailers showing masks, buffer special infected stealth killing armed soldiers, and the piles of skulls mounting up. I had assumed a cult of rage was involved in perpetrating the disease, permeating its pilferous virology as a test of evolutionary worth. Those that retained consciousness and humanity after being exposed to the infection would experience the positives of the virus to become stronger, faster, and more brutal. And in the case of the Alpha in the movie, a bigger dong. All while hunting healthy survivors like those found at the island camp, capturing them and or subjecting them to the infection via mindless drones of ragers to expose them to blood or spit, thus either making a new carrier that works with them or making a new mindless infected roaming the mainland, ignoring carriers, and thus circumventing the 1 month lifespan possibility. If you keep making new infected as a cult thing, it would make sense why they're still infected out there, while also having the cult members taking the skulls of the dead infected and making a monument to them and their sacrifices for the next evolution in man. Since these are not traditional zombies, or even zombies in most senses of the word because they are still very much alive, typically in zombie media, the undead soldiers remain alive through what is basically an unnatural process, not needing energy to continue to exist and somehow preventing rot and deterioration. The Walking Dead's walkers are a resolute example of this, existing decades in even as mostly rotted flesh bags that are still moving and have the power to bite people's flesh off easily, and have now even started to mutate despite never eating, sleeping, or doing anything that would mandate what a living creature would need to live. What has changed for the rage infected is basically the virus is going back to its roots. What do I mean by that? Well, the chimps were the precursor to the outbreak. They also serve as an evolutionary mirror to where the rage virus is going. Think of humanity devolving and building itself back up. Both the survivors on the British Isles and the infected of the mainland started from nothing thing when the outbreak first started. The survivors adapting as civilizations had before, as shown by the stock footage that is all across the movie of medieval times and preparations for World War, while the infected are much more animalistic in their advance. Many times throughout the movie, we get like these Animal Planet night vision goggle shots, and it's all in red where you can see their eyes glowing. It's kind of shown to illuminate when near a light source, similar to how animals whose eyes have the tapetum lucidum. This may or may not be a result of the mutation in the virus, but it shows that they are being animalistic, and more so impressively is how they are beginning to hunt. We do see infected in rivers trying to catch fish, trying to eat animals. They do eat, and that's the next point I want to get into. The infected had begun to change long ago and followed an almost evolutionary path, learning to group up, follow calls from other infected, gather food in the ground and in streams, hunt in packs with alphas as leaders, and even have different forms depending on their physiology and their body's response to the virus long term. It is this evolutionary development that causes the infected to be able to survive beyond their original shelf life of just over a month. Out of kind of nowhere, it's explained that they all learned to eat, to hunt and forage for food however they can get. How this happened is never really explained. It just happened sometime in the last almost 3 decades. Somehow, the entirety of the infected populace either collectively decided to start eating and drinking water one day as if a hive mind had instructed all of them, or that alphas or smarter infected started to crop up in that first month and ate what they could to survive. And then regular infected saw this, and I guess something ticked in their brain that eating and drinking was a good thing. Sure, I can get behind that idea, if it were not for the fact that the infected die so quickly. For them to adapt to do the basic necessities of life beyond just being berserkers. It's even shown that they can prioritize eating over their urges to infect and or kill, as seen at the very end of 28 years later when a group of infected began to chase Spike, as one of them elected to not even chase him and to completely stop and eat the fish that he was cooking instead. There is a disconnect of the days of the solely murderous infected to the years of them surviving, adapting, and evolving. There is a lot of time in between then. But let's put that to the side for now and focus more on the evolving concept. How they both have created 4 different variants of the Rage infected and how they roam the mainlands of the British Isles. Ralph Fiennes' character explains that the Rage virus reacts within a person's body much like steroids do, not anabolic steroids, mind you, either accelerating muscle growth, bloating up the flesh, or extenuating the anger response in the brain, the same portion of the brain that the manipulated Ebola virus reversed the anger inhibitors before. So what are these variants? Well, as the Left 4 Dead green flu before it, it kind of goes in the form of a hierarchy or these kinds of infected. We do have the common infected, the typical Rage recipients that are indicative of what we have always known from the 28 series, only now working more in groups, in tandem with others, if you will, in the fact that they respond to the sounds and sights of other infected more coherently than just the typical "you have alerted the horde" zombie event. That, and now they are all naked, which, you know, it does make sense that they're all naked. There's a lot of people saying, what would that didn't make sense, or that seems kind of inappropriate. Your clothes would not last 28 years on the same body, just saying that now, but them tig old biddies and elephant trunks are gonna be swangin'. That, and these typical infected can now eat and drink whatever they can. For those that do not respond well to the steroid-like mutations of the virus long term, would they become something referred to as slow lows, extremely bloated, logy, gray-skinned, hairless, and what most would assume are just fat bastards. They stick to crawling around on the ground and eating worms and other slow-moving animals for nourishment, only getting up on their legs on rare occasions, with even child versions of them running away from healthy survivors to show that some of them focus on self-preservation rather than bum-rushing armed individuals. Their tissues are so engorged from the steroids response response in the rage virus that they basically have to crawl around along on the ground due to strain on the body and massive fatigue. They are constantly tired, only really existing to go and eat worms. It's possible this, compounded with their limited source of nutrients, has rendered them very weak and low energy, only electing to get up and run when they feel it's most urgent, either to hunt healthy survivors or animals to cannibalize them or eat them, or to evade being killed themselves. Think basically if the boomers returned for Left 4 Dead 3 and weren't able to puke or explode anymore and literally just crawled on the ground. Now, like their rage kin, they can be both found as solitary units or within familial units to hunt together. On the opposite end of the size spectrum, we have those that do not really work with other infected and obviously rarely eat or drink as well, as seen with the one nearly skeletal infected that everyone assumed was Cillian Murphy's character Jim. It was slow-moving, ragged in its motions, and looked like it was on the brink of death. It's more than likely these are freshly infected, or those infected within the last few weeks, and I will refer to them as the OGs that did not learn or adapt as other infected have at this point in time. Basically, how some infected are the original forms that we saw in 28 days later that eventually died out from lack of basic necessities like eating and drinking for the body. How there are forms out there that took the latter of the old saying, adapt or die. They focused more on the die part. How they are there to show how they are so little of a threat compared to the evolved forms of today. This thing was alone, haggard, and had that one goal in mind, nothing else, and it was to attack. It was obvious it had no intentions of doing anything to survive, just roam alone and rage until death. It did not evolve, it did not adapt, it did not learn to work with others. It was there just to kill and then die. Which, I mean, it isn't too far off from the motives of the alpha, the peak of rage evolution. Alphas are the pinnacle of mutation and evolution within the rage ranks, superior in mass, height, dick size, and strength in every shape and form. Able to fully sprint faster than other infected with muscles strong enough to rip the heads off any mammal in seconds flat, making them extremely durable where multiple arrows to the body barely cause them any harm or pause in their relentless chase, showing how certain individuals will only gain the positive effects of the good doctor's suggestion of steroid manipulation from the rage virus. It's through this physical superiority that alphas will give structure to packs and groups of infected by leading them, like primitive man, and in many pack mentality animals like lion prides and, ironically enough, chimpanzees, the most aggressive and assertive of the bunch ends up leading them. That notion of linear evolution to our predecessors, the chimps, coming full circle here. It isn't just brawn that is beefed up for the alphas though. The rage sin Momoas have developed a hunting instinct as well as focusing on its leader role to guide its brothers and sisters for common goals of hunting, killing, and survival, guiding them to areas with fresh water, fish, and other animals to properly gain fuel for their rage-ridden bodies. They can repress their instinct to kill to quietly spectate survivors from afar to calculate the best time to strike and or instruct its bloody legion. The alpha can suppress its instincts, but its other rage-infected can't, giving more meaning to why they're alphas, roaring to summon them so that they may descend on survivors. Alphas do not show any sign of wishing to infect the healthy, preferring to work with its current infected or by itself, as proven by how it chooses the fastest way to kill prey by decapitating them, even showing how their mind has developed, choosing to use the spinal cord and head as a mace to beat people to death on a whim. By using other infected as pawns, the alpha can also seek to ambush survivors while they are preoccupied, making them both hard to kill, hard to detect, and hard to survive against. As to how many alphas are out there remains to be seen. We only saw 2. In other alpha-centric animal groups, alphas can also be aggressive towards one another. So it may be at this point in time, after all the years that have passed, that the alphas we see are ones that killed other alphas to come out as the absolute strongest and smartest. Countermeasures have been discovered against the infected, albeit by one singular crazy doctor living in a pile of bones for close to 2 decades, using iodine, another antiseptic, to coat yourself in, acting as somewhat of a Walking Dead Walker Guts camouflage to keep normal infected away. Could also be that it's a preventative for the virus, but you would think NATO, global health officials, and more would have discovered it by now. But it's a movie. We need the main characters within the plot to discover the holes in a virus, just like Brad Pitt did in World War Z when he was the only one that connected the dots that terminally ill people were invisible to the undead. Certain types of morphine or homemade morphine can be shot into the infected to stun them and make them basically dormant, which can only mean the extreme stress on the brain and the rage symptoms are quelled, leading to the entire body and mind going near catatonic, lending to the original reverse anger inhibitors controlling the body. With them numbed, the viral state causing a rage infected to temporarily rest and basically be at peace before it wears off and then continues hunting people and doing what it still. Certain questions do arise for the infected and how they have survived for as long as they have. Basically, every infected on the mainland that hasn't been freshly infected is bare ass naked. So in the winter, when it can get as low as freezing temperatures, how do they stay warm and not die of hypothermia? Did they just get in gigantic naked piles and use each other's most likely accelerated body heat at night? It's not like these primitive men and women have discovered how to skin animals and use their coats as clothes for insulation. Plus, during that time, eating would be even more necessary to stay warm, with colder temps on their naked bodies making hunting animals even harder, especially with fish in colder streams and deer in snow-covered ground. Hunting with no weapons or tools to speak of is already hard enough. Now, the slow-mos primarily survive off eating worms and other easy-to-snag meat. How would bloated creatures like these even survive off such little portions? Maybe for how little energy they expend because they are sticking to the ground and not really moving? Although the child versions do lead us to believe that the infected may be breeding, so having enough energy to feed its bloated body, have sex, and have a fat rage fetus begs more to inquire. And let's not forget the pregnant infected found in the long abandoned train, implying that either a pregnant woman got infected and gave birth to a healthy baby, or that the alpha is using its 28 inches deeper to make some rage babies. But even if they are breeding, it is shown that the freshly born infant is not infected. The doctor states through the magic of the placenta. I can't say that with a straight face, but the magic of the placenta did the newborn completely negate the effects of the rage virus, despite it being covered in the rage blood from its very infected mother. But since the placenta is the first organ developed in the fetal stages, it is constantly exposed to the blood of its mother, meaning constant exposure from conception may have given it total immunity to the virus. Not just carrier status, but full-blown AIDS plot armor mama womb vaccine. There may be some semblance of the infected's former self. The pregnant infected showed no signs of violent temperament towards the cancer-ridden mother and the soldier and son. Instead, she has we are one and the same as they touch their hands together, allowing the healthy mom to help her give birth, cut the umbilical cord, and get the kid out and clean it off before it reverted to a mindless, violent animal mindset, then dying off, creating an implication that suppressing the rage virus is possible and there is semblance of humanity within each person for current and or long-term infection and preventing the disease altogether. Who knows where we are going with that plot point? Maybe cycling back to immunity and or carriers like Andy and his mum from 28 weeks later, turning the tide of the years-long blood war, or maybe leaning into the group of people being carriers, emulating the appearance, but hopefully not the actions of a well-known pedophile. It's all just hints and clues to allude to future sections of the trilogy and a whole lot more setup, so hopefully we get more payoff than setup than we do with the first movie by itself. But the point being, the infected have changed. That point is blatantly blatantly obvious. They have evolved in the sense that chimps did in many ways, to learn to group up, hunt together, use tools, and have leaders, developing as primitive men and women, with the alphas using weapons and tools and displaying heads as either warnings or trophies to other infected and healthy alike, opening doors, watching over situations to analyze plans, and more, mutating with the steroidal mutations of the rage virus to either become bloated and sluggish, normal but functioning, decrepit skeletons begging for the sweet release of death, or Giga-Chad alphas hitting the gym and doing cock push-ups. How they survive this long is by the more intelligent of their kind rising up to basically remind their fellow kind that they can too eat, drink, hunt, and rest, to be in groups and communities and more, to mimic the basic necessities of life and existence as Homo sapiens instead of dying as withered husks on the side of the road. Evolution through mutation and through knowledge and environment. How this plays out. If the doctor's findings on iodine and morphine could spur a large controlled effort to nullify the infected population, to trap them and either wipe them out or seek treating them with what is the magic of the placenta reasoning, Britain solving its own problems within its own borders of the virus with its own parallel of Brexit, and Spike and the pedopals either working together or him trying to fight off the cult of Jimmy and waging a war, maybe the island community and the carriers, and then we have a three-way battle between the island, the carriers, and the infected. Only time will tell though, but it will be interesting to see how the rage virus develops genetically and socially. That wraps up this bloody redux of the rage virus. Are there portions of what I discussed that needs rewriting, expanding, or omission? Let me know down below. We had lots of discourse and comments about my disappointment with 28 years later. I'm not going to go into that, but art in media is subjective and people either really loved this movie or really hated it. There's not much in between except for a few comments here and there. It's really causing a lot of rage. So they exceeded in making subjective art. I guess we will see when Bone Temple comes out how all of this bones up. Thank you to my Patreon patrons and YouTube channel members for supporting the channel by just chipping in a buck. You can do the same to have your name featured on this viral list here. Do so on Patreon and you can see my videos up to a week early. Thanks to Chago for editing today's video together, and until next time, I'm Zach S, aka Wild Such Gaming. Never forget to stay happy, stay healthy, suppress your rage, and stay wild.